This comment showed up on my video, and the moment I read it, I immediately knew I had to talk about it. Because honestly, the answer is simple. Deep down, I think we already know it. Ready? It's because the rarity system is bullshit. Seriously, the more you think about it, the more your brain starts hurting. It's inconsistent as hell. But of course, I can't just say all that and refuse to explain myself. So let's start from the beginning. If we are going to talk about this properly, there are a few things that we need to clear up first. Otherwise, none of this is going to make any sense. First, people treat star rarity in Fate Grand Order like it directly equals power, and I don't blame them. The higher the stars, the higher the level cap. A 5-star servant naturally reaches level 90, while a 3-star only reaches 70 without grails. So yeah, it feels like rarity equals strength. But technically, stars are supposed to represent rarity, not power. Or at least I think that was the original idea. Because logically speaking, higher rarity should mean a servant is harder to summon. But then, we hit the problem. Marketing. Let's be real here. The developers obviously want a high rarity servants to feel special, so people spend money trying to get them. So naturally, the servants usually get really attractive design, flashy ascension, powerful skills, insane animation, huge story importance, or personalities people instantly get attached to. Basically, they become the premium product of the game. And once a character is designed to feel that special, their rarity gets pushed higher so players feel lucky or unique for owning them. That's the gameplay and marketing side of things. But lore-wise, in universe-wise, what's actually supposed to make a servant high rarity? And honestly, this is where things start getting messy. From what we've seen in Fate, summon difficulty usually depends on how connected a servant is to the world through legends, relics, myths, or catalysts tied to their life. At least that seems to be the idea. For example, summoning Artoria Pendragon in a Holy Grail War is supposed to be incredibly difficult. It's borderline impossible, unless you meet a very specific condition. Kiritsugu could summon her because he had Avalon. And there is also the whole thing with Artoria near death state, which I'm not gonna explain since that's a huge spoiler. But outside of special circumstances, summoning her properly should be extremely difficult, so her being 5-star makes sense. She's rare even among already rare heroic spirit. Same with Gilgamesh. He's one of the oldest heroes in human history. To summon him properly, you would probably need some insanely ancient artifact connected to him. And good luck finding that, I guess. And then you have servants like Arjuna Alter or Lancer Artoria, who technically shouldn't even exist under normal circumstances to begin with. So naturally, summoning them should be absurdly difficult. That's all makes sense, really. But then, they suddenly throw stuff like this. Medusa, a literal monster from Greek mythology who rides Pegasus, being only 3-star. Charlotte Corday, being a 2-star even though most people barely even know her. Hector being 3-star while Achilles is 5-star. That's weird, isn't it? Yeah, I deliberately picked some of the weirdest example possible because these are the kind of servants that makes the whole rarity system start feeling really questionable lore-wise. Now, sure, if we think hard enough, we can probably come up with theories to explain all of them individually. But at first glance, it still feels weird. Which means we honestly barely understand what actually determines rarity even in universe. Now, what about strength? Does higher rarity automatically means a servant is stronger lore-wise? Well, this is also confusing because legends are directly tied to the heroic spirit strength, right? Like the guy said, the bigger the legend, the stronger the servant usually becomes. And older heroes tend to become even stronger over time because their stories spread across generations and countries. People exaggerate things, they add myth, they change details, they turn warriors into monsters and kings into demigods, which means more mystery, more fame, more conceptual power. But even then, it still doesn't really correlate perfectly. Fate itself already blurs the line between history, mythology, fiction, and even reality. That's why the whole thing starts feeling messy once you think about it too hard. At the end of the day, higher rarity usually just feels like the character gets more effort put into their animation, kit, design, or story role. That's it. At least that's how it feels from a player perspective anyway. That's just how inconsistent fate can be sometimes. So based on everything we've established so far, the real answer to why Blackbeard is only 2-star despite being one of the most notorious and recognizable pirates in history is probably just this. The developers didn't think Edward Teach or Blackbeard was important enough to make premium. That's it. Harsh? Yeah. But probably true. And don't get me wrong, Rarity is still just Rarity. Blackbeard could be insanely strong lore-wise if the writers wanted him to be. Every servant has their own strength and their own way of fighting. We literally have Arash sitting in 1-star roster and the guy can turn himself into a living nuke. Then there's Kukulane sitting at 3-star, basically an unkillable fighting machine. And as far as we know, Blackbeard gets stronger the more people he has on his ship, especially if those people are strong themselves. Sometimes a character is simply designed to fill a low rarity slot in the game system. And honestly, Blackbeard was probably also a victim of early FGO design. Back then, compared to the flashy servants like Francis Drake, the developers probably just didn't see much value in making him high rarity. But honestly though, I hate this kind of answer. It's boring. It's like asking why Naruto became a Hokage and then answering because Masashi Kishimoto wanted him to be. That's stupid, isn't it? That's technically true, yes. But that's not a very interesting discussion. So let's cook something for our bro here so he can be satisfied. Alright, from this point on, we're talking lore. We've already get our answer for why Blackbeard is a 2-star from the developer's perspective. Now let's forget about marketing, game design and all that stuff for a minute and try to figure out what the in-universe explanation might be. Okay, here we go. The first theory. If higher rarity means harder to summon, then Edward Teach being 2-star should mean one thing. He's easy to summon, right? But why? Well, maybe because his image is just way too familiar. This is confusing when I say it like this, but let me explain it to you guys. I actually got this idea from a theory about the Hassans, the assassin class servants I mean. A lot of them are low rarity too. And maybe that's because their name is basically the origin of the assassin class itself. The Hassan group was called the Assassins in Arabic, and the word assassin itself supposed to came from that name. So if someone tries to summon an assassin class servants, the guild system might naturally gravitate toward the figures most strongly associated with the concept of assassins. And since the Hassans are basically the original assassins in both history and terminology, they end up becoming some of the easiest assassin class servants to summon. And honestly, I think something similar might be happening with Blackbeard. In a way, his entire life, appearance, and legends basically becomes a catalyst for summoning the ideal pirate, the pirate. Think about how Catalyst works in Fate. Sometimes Catalyst doesn't even need to be directly connected to the heroic spirit, right? The system can interpret symbols, stories, concepts, environments, or even vibes into a summon. Even something as random as personality, a feeling, or the place where the ritual happens can sometimes act as a catalyst. So it doesn't really clear. Like it can be anything. So imagine a mage trying to summon a cunning warrior who can fight flexibly on both land and sea. And maybe they're performing the ritual on the deck of a ship, or near a pile of treasure, or out at sea. The guild system would probably go, oh, you mean a pirate then? And when people think about pirates, there are certain images that basically everyone recognizes instantly. Actually though, let's try this for real. Close your eyes for a second and imagine a pirate. Seriously, pause the video if you want. Now open your eyes. I'm like 90% sure most of you imagine at least some of this. Giant beard, crazy pirate laugh, pirate ship, pistols, chaos, greed, reckless behavior, and degeneracy. And guess what? Edward Teach or Blackbeard fits all of those almost perfectly. Just for the visual, it's like almost the perfect description. Even the degeneracy part. I mean, being an extreme whip is considered big degeneracy in certain circles too, right? So maybe that's exactly why Edward Teach is so easy to summon. His image became too universal. Meanwhile, Francis Drake and the other pirate servants feel way more specific in comparison. Their appearances are flashy and unique, but not exactly what most people instantly imagine when hearing the word pirate. Hell, even the characters themselves were shocked when Drake turned out to be a woman. So because of the way he looks, acts, and does everything, he basically screams the pirate. That might be why he's so easy to summon, which would explain why his rarity is low. That's the first one. But there is also another theory. This one I get it from the internet. A really interesting theory, let's just call it the X theory. The idea is that rarity isn't actually based on raw power or how difficult it is for a servant to connect to the living world, but rather on how willing they are to answer the summon of a completely unknown master they've never met before. And honestly, the more I think about it, the more it weirdly fits. According to this theory, 5-star servants are usually people with absurdly high standards, massive personality issues, or very specific conditions before they are willing to cooperate. Like Gilgamesh, for example. That guy's ego is so massive, he probably wouldn't even answer the summon of some random mongrel. Or John Alter, who spends half her existence being angry at literally everything around her. 4-star servants are more willing to cooperate, but usually only if the master's personality matches theirs. Like Emiya being more cooperative with masters who genuinely try to do good. Or Artoria Alter honestly being easier to deal with if junk food is involved. 3-star servants are usually more flexible. They may still have personal issues, but they will generally answer the summons anyway. Like Cuckoo Lane. The guy mostly just wants a good fight, that's it. I guess as long as you don't force him to stab himself again. And then you have most 2-star servants. They usually don't ask much from their masters at all. For example is Matahari. She is basically just happy someone summoned her, even if she ends up getting thrown into the second archive 5 minutes later. Don't tell Shin I said all this. And I think this theory kinda works. Sure, if we dig deeper, we will probably find characters that completely break the pattern. But the general idea is still there, it's still interesting. Instead of rarity being based on difficulty connecting to the world, rarity becomes based on difficulty connecting emotionally with a master. And honestly, seeing how happy-go-lucky Blackbeard is, I think this fits him perfectly. He doesn't ask for much, he's easy to get along with, and he's not too difficult to emotionally connect with as a master. So, according to the X theory, that would naturally make him a low-rarity servant. And I guess those two theories are the ones that makes the most sense to me from lore perspective. But you guys can always add something in the comment section. Now, before I end this video, I kinda want to say one more thing about Blackbeard's goofiness. The fact that these huge notorious pirates get treated like comic relief. Because honestly, I don't think the charm of this guy comes from his design, his kit, or even his questionable taste in women. It's his ability to completely bury his terrifying reputation under something so stupid and funny that people stop taking him seriously. Maybe the goofy personality really is just an act, because every now and then, this guy suddenly becomes way too intelligent and observant for a simple comic relief characters. I guess we already saw this back in Okeanos. Even the hidden mastermind using his ship couldn't fully trick or ambush him because of how naturally paranoid and cautious he was. Blackbeard only got caught off guard once another attack distracted him, and at that point, it had basically turned into an all-out war. And sometimes, he says things that sounds way too real for a goofy pirate characters. Even in lighter stories like Heroic Spirit Food Chronicles, he casually talks about solving food shortage at sea by killing someone so there are fewer people to feed. He laughs it off like it's a joke, but Drake, Anne Bonny, and Mary Read all basically agree that situations like that genuinely happen in real-life pirate. So, if you're still bothered by a Blackbeard being a 2-star, maybe think of it this way. Don't worry too much about him being 2-star, because that's just technicality. Don't worry about his strengths either, since his legend is still built on fear, cruelty, and terror across the sea. And the last is, don't let the goofy act fool you, because maybe that's exactly what he wants. I mean, a man becomes far more dangerous once everyone stops seeing him as a threat, right? What do you guys think? Share this video somewhere and I'll see you guys next time.